Hello, everyone. My name is Montana Henderson, and I had the opportunity at completing my internship at HarbisonWalker International, or HWI for short. The company is located in Fairfield, Alabama, and the facility specializes in the manufacturing of refractory products. Basically, refractories are materials that are designed to withstand extremely high temperatures and harsh conditions. They're used to protect things like furnaces and other equipment used in high temperature industrial processes. At the Alabama facility specifically, we manufactured refractory bricks that are primarily used by the steel industry. The manufacturing process itself was pretty extensive. It started in crushing and grinding, where the material was ground into 3 different levels of fineness. From there, the material moved into pressing, where it was formed into the bricks. And then the bricks went through the oven and cooling process before eventually moving to packaging to be shipped out. One of the first things that stood out to me when I first started was just how dirty of an environment it could be. I was warned beforehand that it was going to be a dirty job, but I definitely underestimated just how dirty that meant. With all of the grinding and pressing operations and the amount of graphite used in the bricks, there was dust everywhere. It would get in the air, on the equipment, on your clothes, and pretty much every surface throughout certain areas of the facility. It was definitely a manufacturing environment that was completely different from anything I had experienced before. After getting more familiar with the facility and how the different manufacturing processes worked, I was able to start taking on some of my own projects. One of the first major projects I was given was developing a portable power tool inventory and inspection program for the facility. Before this, there wasn't really a system in place for keeping track of the tools or making sure they were being inspected regularly. The tools were also spread throughout different areas of the facility, and quite a few of them were in poor conditions. I started by going throughout the facility and finding as many of the portable power tools as I could. There ended up being over 60 tools that needed to be accounted for. Once I had a better idea of what we had, I worked on developing a system for each tool would be labeled, inspected, and tracked going forward. From there, I went through each tool individually and completed an inspection. Every tool was given its own identification number and added to a master inventory where I documented whether it passed or failed. If it failed, exactly what was wrong with it. Since there hadn't been an inspection program before, I did find quite a few tools that needed to be taken out of service. One of the most common problems I found was damage to cords and plugs. Any tool that failed was tagged out of service so that it couldn't continue being used. I then looked into what would need to be either repair the tool and bring it back to proper working condition or to replace it altogether. This ended up being a pretty time-consuming project because I wasn't just creating the program, I was also actually going through the process of implementing it across the facility. Once everything was in place, I also worked with the maintenance team so they understood the inspection and labeling process, and so that they could continue the program after my internship ended. I liked this project because by the time I finished, there was an actual system in place. That it wasn't there when I started, and it was something the facility could continue using after I left. Another major project I worked on, and probably the project I am most proud of from my internship, was developing a traffic management plan for the facility. This was also my largest and most time-consuming project of the summer. The project came about because there had been several near misses and incidents at other facilities involving interactions between forklifts and pedestrians. Because of this, company EHS leadership wanted the Alabama facility to develop a traffic map and a plan for the facility. At the time, there really wasn't an existing traffic map for me to work from, so I pretty much had to start from scratch. I started by using an overhead view of the facility on Google Earth. Google Earth has a measurement feature, so I went section by section and measured the different parts of the building to get a rough scale of the facility. I then took these measurements and entered them one by one into SmartDraw. This allowed me to basically build the entire floor plan myself. This took a lot of time because I was constantly going back and forth between the map and the actual facility. I walked the facility multiple times to make sure different areas were represented correctly and to better understand how traffic actually moved through each area. Once I had the basic floor plan completed, I was able to build the actual traffic map. I identified things like the normal forklift areas and routes, PPE zones, and different hazard points throughout the facility. While doing this, I also identified several blind spots and areas where pedestrians and forklifts could interact that needed better signage or additional controls. This was definitely the most difficult project I worked on. Even my supervisor had told me that creating a map of the facility was something he had struggled with himself, so I was really proud of how complete the final product ended up being. The response to it was probably one of the most rewarding parts of the internship. They were pleased enough with the finished map that the plan was to have it printed on large signs and displayed throughout the facility. EHS leadership also wanted to share it with other facilities so they could use it as a guide when developing their own traffic maps. Out of everything I completed during my internship, this was probably the project I was most proud of. I also feel like the work I did on this project, along with my other projects throughout the summer, played a part in showing them what I was capable of and eventually contributed to the job opportunity I was offered at the end of my internship. While the traffic management plan was my largest project, some of the other work I completed came directly from safety concerns that happened at the facility. One example of this was developing a new standard operating procedure for working at heights. Right as I was starting my internship, there had been a near miss involving a maintenance employee who was working at an elevated height. While working, he had misplaced some of his tools down, and one of the tools fell and landed on a forklift that was being operated below. Luckily, the forklift operator was not struck and no one was injured, but the forklift itself was damaged. After the incident, we realized that there wasn't an existing standard operating procedure specifically covering working at heights. Because of that, I was given the responsibility of developing one for the facility. The procedure focused on making sure employees understood how to safely work at an elevated height, and more specifically, how to prevent objects from falling onto people or equipment below. Some of the main things we addressed were maintaining 3 points of contact, using the proper equipment such as tool bags and tool tethers, and making sure tools weren't placed somewhere where they could accidentally fall. I also worked on signage that could be placed below an area where someone was working at heights. This helped to make other employees aware that overhead work was taking place, so they knew to stay clear of that area. Once the procedure was completed, the next step was making sure the team was trained on the new requirements so that everyone understood what was expected going forward. The project was also later used as a safety improvement that could be shared with others in the company. Compared with some of my other projects, this one was a little more straightforward, but I liked being able to take an actual near miss that happened at the facility and use it to put something in place that could help prevent a similar incident from happening again. While these were the 3 major projects I worked on throughout the summer, they were only part of my overall experience at HWI. My day-to-day work gave me the opportunity to be involved with a lot of different parts of the facility and see what working in EHS actually looked like. Most mornings started with a meeting that involved employees and managers from across the facility. Each department would give an update on what was happening on their side of things. For safety, we would have a safety stand down where we might give a safety tip for the day, talk about a recent near miss, discuss something that needed to be done differently, or go over a flash report if an injury had occurred at another facility. Other departments would give their updates as well. For example, quality might discuss issues they were seeing with the bricks, while packaging would talk about things like how many metric tons were being shipped. After those meetings, a lot of my day-to-day depended on what I was working on at the time. I was given quite a bit of independence with my projects, so once I understood what needed to be done, I was able to figure out how I wanted to approach the work and then follow up with my supervisor as I progressed. I would say my time was split pretty evenly between working at my desk and being out on the manufacturing floor. At my desk, I might be developing a procedure, updating safety documents, or working on one of my larger projects. When I was out on the floor, I was almost always interacting with someone. I would talk with employees and supervisors, ask questions about how different tasks were performed, and actually get to see the process for myself. Being out on the floor was definitely the part I enjoyed the most. I liked getting to know the people working there and being able to see firsthand what they did every day. It made it much easier to understand a safety concern when I could actually see the work being performed and talk directly with the person doing it. Outside of my larger projects, I was also able to help with different safety needs as they came up throughout the summer. Altogether, I think having that mix of independent project work and actually being out in the facility gave me a much better understanding of what working in EHS is really like. Beyond just learning what day-to-day work in EHS looked like, the internship also helped me learn a lot about myself and what I might want to do moving forward. As the summer went on, I became a lot more comfortable and confident in the work I was doing. At the beginning of my internship, I was definitely uncertain because I was coming into a completely new industry and environment. But as I learned more about the facility and was given more independence with my own work, I really started to fall in love with what I was doing. One of the biggest things this experience showed me is just how broad the safety field really is. There are so many different directions I can take after graduation, and this internship helped me realize that this is work I actually enjoy doing. I especially enjoyed getting to work closely with the employees and seeing safety firsthand. Working in a manufacturing environment can be hard and dirty, but there is something really rewarding about knowing that the work you're doing is helping make sure everyone gets to go home to their loved ones the same way they came into the facility at the beginning of their shift. That was probably one of the biggest things I took away from this experience. By the end of the summer, I also received an opportunity that I really wasn't expecting when I first started my internship. My supervisor had originally worked as the quality manager, but had temporarily stepped into the EHS manager position, while the company looked for someone to permanently fill the role. After seeing the work I completed throughout my internship, I was offered the opportunity to take over the position. For me, that was a really rewarding way to end the internship. I started the summer uncertain about working in an environment I knew very little about, and I ended it with an opportunity to continue working with the same people and facility that I had grown to really enjoy being a part of. Overall, I'm extremely grateful for the experience I had at HWI, and for everyone at the facility who took the time to teach me, answer my questions, and trust me with my own work throughout the summer. I learned a lot from this internship, and I'm excited to take what I learned with me as I continue moving forward in my career. Thank you for listening to my presentation.